Welcome to the Sisters in Service podcast. My name is Kat Corchado. I'm a fellow Air Force veteran who, after 20 years of active duty, struggled with transition after leaving service. The Sisters in Service podcast is a platform to include all women veterans, organizations, military spouses, and Blue Star, Gold Star families in talking about the trials and triumphs we face while in service and after service. I want to take a moment to thank all of you who have taken the time to listen and follow me on my journey. My podcast is every Tuesday, and I hope you will tune in. Until then, please be safe, take care of each other, and until next time. Welcome to our newest episode of Sisters in Service. I am your host, Kat Corchado. My guest today is Jen Amos. She is the host of an award-winning podcast called Holding Down the Fort. She is a huge entrepreneur. We're going to get into that. And she was also on season 3 as a contestant on the reality podcast competition, America's Next Top Podcaster. Jen, welcome to Sisters in Service.
Kat, thank you so much for having me and for sharing all of that stuff. I'm excited to connect with you and to just talk about anything and everything. So let's get into it.
Yeah, let's do this. So I understand that, first of all, let's get into this podcast thing. I want to know more about this America's Next Top Podcast because I'm just like, wait, why don't I know about this? What's going on? How did you find out about that?
Well, I have to give it to the podcasting community. I'm part of various groups, and I think it was the end of 2020. One group mentioned like, "Hey, like this competition is looking for people. Why don't you go ahead and apply?" And at that time, I was kind of applying for anything, knowing that they say that if you want to increase your success, you need to double your rate of failure. And I thought, well, let me just apply for everything and see what sticks. And it was early January of 2021 when I got the message that I was going to be one of the, I think, 10 contestants. And I was very surprised. I didn't really care, to be quite honest. I was like, I was happy I got it, but I wasn't expecting to get it. Right. So the fact that I got it, I was like, oh, what a responsibility, and a sense of responsibility and honor and privilege. And also just, how exciting to kind of put myself in the fast track in the podcasting world to learn in a competition. So it was really cool. I have to give it to, like I said, the podcasting community for just putting the word out there and, the opportunity to apply and be chosen as one of the contestants. So it was a very interesting time. And that was a year ago, Kat. So it's crazy.
That's fun. So how long had you been podcasting before you found out about it?
Well, I started podcasting in summer 2019. And at this time, my life had felt so transient. Like I kind of had this belief that nothing physical was going to last for me. And that's a whole story in itself for later. But I came to this conclusion that in order for me to build community, I would have to do it online. And so I was trying to find a way to do that. And I remember what happened one time. My husband, we often call him the dog and pony show of our business. He's usually the one that gets invited to, tell his story and talk about our business. And the person that was interviewing him had a technical issue with their show. So they sent him, kind of like what we had before we started recording, sent another program to record. And it was that program. I'm not going to mention it because I don't use it anymore. But that program showed me how easy it was to get into podcasting. And when I just started getting into it, Kat, it was crazy. I started 5 podcast shows at once. That's how crazy I was at the beginning. I narrowed it down to 2, just so you know. I narrowed it down. But I remember as I started to do it and I started to interview people, I felt like I was able to kind of find my happy space. And before you know it, 2020 happened, the pandemic happened, people couldn't meet in person. So it was actually the perfect time for me to have jumped into the podcasting space because it really became my way of relationship building and, prospecting business and leads and, really just getting my name out there. So it's just so crazy how, having that lack, feeling like you lack a sense of community propelled me to try to build something online. And, here we are talking today, fellow podcaster, to be able to tell the tale
Yes.
of what my life was like, almost 3 years ago now when I started podcasting.
Wow. I just surpassed, I think in April will be a year and a half. But when you mentioned COVID happening, and I remember some statistic, they said that there were over 1 million podcasts during the pandemic that people started.
I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised because I think podcasting is that thing for a lot of people where they're like, I want to start a podcast, and they just put it off and put it off and put it off. And then of course they're stuck at home. They're like, oh my gosh, this is the perfect time to take on projects that I've been putting off forever. And unfortunately though, Kat, a lot of those podcast shows didn't make it, post pandemic. A lot of people, got started, went back to their normal lives and are doing other things, or they needed to find a job. And I just feel so grateful that, I started at a time where, podcasting, it wasn't like the fad. It was kind of like, oh, I'm doing it because I finally know how to do it. I want to do it, and so the pandemic really just kind of, intensified my desire to stay connected with people, as opposed to like, it didn't spark this new interest for me to do podcasting because I was already doing it. So I feel really grateful that in a sense we were able to survive, kind of the pandemic podcasters
or even the pod fade that they talk about all the time.
Yes.
I had the idea for a year and I kept saying, I don't have time. And then COVID hit and I was like, well, okay, let me try it. Let's see what's going to happen. But I think those that make it, what I mean by make it is that they've been consistent. Podcasting as a host is a labor of love. It's about your why. And if you can remember your why, you're going to continue to podcast. So great story. I love that. So I read that you had received a bachelor's in journalism and that you were fired from your 4th consecutive job in your young adult life. So my question to you is, even for an adult who's been in the workforce for a long time, what was your mindset during that? When you get fired again, you're like, good grief. What were you thinking and how did you turn it around?
Yeah. Kat, I appreciate you bringing that up, that part of my past in my young 20s, my young adult life coming out of college, because, when I think about it, I actually was thinking about it this year. Like this year will be my 12th year since I've been self-employed. And it blows my mind that was 12 years ago, having been fired consecutively from 4 jobs. Kat, 2 of those jobs I was fired in one day, just by the way. And it was awful. I was awful at holding a job. And every time it broke my heart. Every time I cried. I kid you not, especially the one that, fired me. Like it was one of those. I worked in, a school where I worked in like the after school program, and then I worked during the day. So technically I had like 2 jobs. So I'd start my day in the after school / morning program, go into school during the day, and then after school program. Right. And I just remember when, they fired me from both jobs, and I ended up crying that entire weekend. And, I remember that I wonder if it was that job. It was probably the 4th and final job, but I remember a good friend of mine said, Jen, I don't think you're meant for a job. I don't think that's your thing. And I remember I was kind of at this crossroads where it's like, well, I can put in the energy to, polish up my resume again. I mean, how am I going to update it? I'm going to have to tell all my future employers I got fired 4 times.
Right.
I could invest in that and try to oversell myself or justify why I got fired. Or I could just be in business for myself. And in college, I was fortunate to get into direct sales quite early. A college friend introduced me to a company, and it gave me this financial business education that I think I was always hungry for. I just didn't know it was called business. I didn't understand like how all my friends were really, doing the American dream, go to school, get good grades, get a good job to, A to Z.
Right.
And it just didn't feel right for me. And I'm sure we can get into more of this later, but I think a lot of it had stemmed to the fact that I was a military kid, having moved around every 2 to 3 years for the first 10 years of my life, that, just that constant feeling like you have to reinvent yourself and always have like an escape route.
Yeah.
So I think that's part of it. And so I think being in business for myself and being self-employed really gave me, I guess, that desire to like have that escape route. I can control my destiny. It hasn't been easy, obviously.
Right.
I can totally get into that too. But yeah, I mean, it's crazy to look back and think that was 12 years ago. I was 22. I'm 34 now. I was 22 when I was like, here I am with a bachelor's degree, and I'm in PR. It's not supposed to be hard to find a PR job, especially because it's female dominated. Like I could easily find a job if I wanted to, but how am I getting fired from 4 jobs? And so, yeah, it's crazy. It blows my mind. It really does. And I'm glad you brought that up, because to just reflect on that and be grateful, and to know that I went through so many grieving processes just to be where I am today, and be like, wow, that is part of my past. That is part of who I was. So thanks for reminding me.
Yeah. But look at where you are now. If you had tried to stick it out, I mean, I wish I'd had that kind of foresight at 22, to be honest with you. But my dad was very traditional, and my dad actually retired on a Friday from the Air Force and went to work for McDonnell Douglas, which is now called Boeing, the following Monday.
Wow.
Because that's what you did then. So I thought, well, that's what I'm supposed to be doing. But it didn't work out for me either. So just saying.
It's a celebration.
So what kind of advice would you give to someone who finds themselves kind of where you were? Because sometimes everyone's like, oh, you got to get a job, you got to do this. Sometimes a 9-to-5 or whatever job isn't right for some people. What kind of advice would you give to someone who's maybe feeling that kind of itch to be an entrepreneur?
Well, I think the biggest advice is that I can give is like really, really defining like what you want your lifestyle to look like. Like before you even think about what business you want to get into. I mean, it depends. Everyone gets into entrepreneurship differently. But for me, I really needed, to get paid off of a lot. Like I needed something to support the lifestyle I wanted, which was to be mobile, to be creative, to, really just give me that freedom to figure out who I was, really. And I think what happens for most people, and especially like millennials, they say, millennials will have like 5 to 7 jobs in their lifetime. I think it's like 50 jobs now at this point. It's been a lot, but I think that stat is wrong now. I think it needs to be updated. But, for me, I was thinking like, okay, first and foremost, I'm an introvert. And I know it doesn't look like it. I know it doesn't seem like that, but trust me, a lot of introverts are in the podcasting space for a reason. And I couldn't work in an office where people like where my desk is like facing someone else, for example. Like I couldn't be in one of those like open, I don't know what you call them, like the open desk
workspaces.
Where, like,
workspaces
where you can like see everyone's faces and you can hear you can hear people on the phones. And
I want my own cubicle, with the 4 little walls, so I could just hide.
Exactly. And I couldn't do that. I couldn't like be in the same, like, even when I think about the jobs I had, I couldn't just like be around people who weren't thinking of their future, for lack of a better term. It was kind of like, oh, this is my job. This is my job. And if I lose it, I'll figure it out from there. Like it was really hard to be in that kind of environment. And also, and I'm sure this has to do with my own daddy issues, like I couldn't deal with authority, like most of my bosses were men, and it was really hard for me to, listen and be obedient and be told what to do. So right. I think that like what I had learned is that if you don't know what you want, you have to first learn or identify what you don't want. I don't want to work in an office. I don't want to work the 9-to-5,
I don't want a boss.
You don't want a boss. Yeah. And I don't want to commute. I don't want to be on the free, like I lived in SoCal for 20 years, lots of traffic, like, and I feel very fortunate that I figured out like kind of like the traffic times, but I also, told myself, I don't want to be stuck in traffic. Like my brother used to do the hour commute from, Chula Vista all the way to, I think, Mira Mesa or Carlsbad, which is like, an hour, hour and a half, depending on traffic. And I'm like,
Wow.
I don't want to do that. I want to just wake up and work, And so then once I was able to identify what I didn't want to do, I was able to identify what I wanted to do. It's like, okay, I don't want a 9 to 5. So that means I want to have a job that, supports my lifestyle as opposed to my lifestyle supporting my job, I guess you can say.
Yes.
And so just being able to start identifying that and going from there. But really, at this point, I'm on my third business venture. I think this one's going to stick, though. I think this is the one. But but anyway, either way, it wasn't really about like it. What I realized is the common pattern with all like every endeavor I took was the lifestyle, just the ability to continue to explore all that I am. Yes. And being able to, actually, I just not finished. I'm like halfway through the book, The E-Myth, and the author talks about how working on your business is a big metaphor for working on your life. You have to come with your most authentic self in your business because that's the only way your business is going to be successful. And so, to be able to have gone through the types of business ventures I've taken in the last 12 years, I look at it and I honor it because it's like, oh, that's who I was. That's who I was at that time to be able to have a business like that, and then it transformed throughout the years. I decided I needed to move on. And hey, that's the life of an entrepreneur. You're not going to stick with one business, one idea. You're going to have to quote unquote kill your babies, as they say, like if you're in love with an idea and it's not working. Unfortunately, you have to.
Okay, let's look at this again. Yeah. I think too that it's, when you look back on it, I know at the time it doesn't feel that way, but now you look back on it and it was almost like the universe saying, this isn't for you. And I don't think of it as failing. I say that it's failing forward because if you hadn't failed at that, you wouldn't be doing it what you're doing now. And I've always had, I think, an entrepreneurial spirit because girl, I sold everything. You name it, I sold it. But, I kept trying to find that thing. Like if I have to sell you something, no, you either want it or you don't. So I sucked at it. I did. I sucked, but it kept leading me to somewhere. So I don't think of it as failing. I feel like it's more failing forward because now I'm here. So I know that your podcast, Holding Down the Fort, is advocating for military families, entrepreneurs, women, and mental health. So what is your connection? Tell our audience your connection to the military.
Yeah, well, I was born into a military household in Yokosuka, Japan. So back in the late 80s. And I think my dad was like halfway through his service. I think he just kind of entered becoming like doing career. I think I have to confirm the dates and times, but I was born into a military family, and just like with many military kids, every 2 to 3 years you end up moving, and you kind of end up uprooting your life and starting over and making new friends, et cetera, et cetera. And it wasn't a bad life, Kat, like because I really had community. I had the military community. I had the Filipino community. Like I come from a Filipino background. I had my blood family. Like there was just it felt like there was a lot of community that it didn't seem like a problem. However, it was when I was 10 years old when my dad was at his last duty station, which happened to be the base that I was born in, Yokosuka, Japan. So he ended up coming back. And he was about 18 and a half years into service. He was going to finish, his service there in Japan when he gone missing. His last ship was the USS Kitty Hawk. It was traveling from Japan to South Korea. And supposedly he was a man overboard. They sent, jets out. They sent a search crew out, for 3 solid days. This is what I was told and what I know up until this point. And they had continued the investigation for the following 3 months till they finally decided to, I guess, move on from it. And at that time, I was 10. My brother was 11. My sister was 6. And they told my mom that, we couldn't find him. And you're going to have to leave. You don't have a sponsor in Japan anymore. And so our lives catapulted, from being a military family to a Gold Star family. And, here I was at 10 years old being, thrusted again, all the way back to SoCal, which I ended up living at for 20 years. I'm currently in the East Coast now. And, you know what, Kat, like, even though we settled in one place for 20 years, my mindset did not settle, mentally. Like that whole just craziness of that military life continued to perpetuate in my life because, when I went to an elementary school, I went to another one. Like, even though I went to one in San Diego, I ended up going to another one. And then before you know it, there was middle school that was for 2 years. And then I went to high school, and then I went to a second high school, and then I went to college. And in college, I changed my major 3 times because I just couldn't, I didn't know how to hold on to something. So yeah, that's a little bit about my background, and, definitely happy to get into more details later, but fast forward to 20 years, I end up meeting my husband who, often has to mention that he's a West Point grad, and he
just finds his way in the conversation somehow.
It's always in there. It's always in there. And I say it with love, and something about West Pointers, man. But anyway, he was a West Point grad, and he actually graduated the year that 9/11 happened. And so, he was one of the, him and his class were one of the first to, go overseas and everything. And anyway, in 2008, he not only did he transition out, but he got into the financial industry in Germany, right when the economic crash happened in America. Perfect timing.
Oh yeah.
And anyway, he ended up working there and working really closely with the military community that was overseas in Germany. And eventually he came to SoCal, and that's how we met. And at that time, I was running an online marketing business. He was referred to me as a client because he wanted to build his business online. I promise this doesn't happen all the time. We're still together. And before you know it, I ended up just started working with him. And in working with him, I was able to kind of, rehash my story as a Gold Star family member to be able to understand like how we can help career military families today. So yeah, it is really crazy. Like, my past and with the military community to what I'm doing today for the military community and talking to you and being on your show, Kat.
Well, I'm so glad you're here. I know that I was a military brat also, but I wasn't forward thinking. I thought this is just the way people live. I thought anyone who was in the military, they were special in some way, shape, or form. Not everybody got in, it was like this special club. And we got to go to all these different places. And so out of my 2 brothers, so I'm the oldest, I have 2 brothers. I'm the only one that went in the military. So I'm going to ask you as a military brat, why did you not go in the military? What was your reason? I mean, I kind of know. Maybe, yeah. I think. However, I'm going to ask the question anyway.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer it, which, it was interesting because, in high school and going to college, all my mom wanted me to do was to have a stable job. And she felt like the military was going to provide that. I mean, it kind of depended on every time I changed my major. So the first time I think I changed my major, I think my first major was like psychology. And she was like, oh my gosh, if you stay in school for a long time, you could become a doctor, and then I changed it to like something else. It was like conflict resolution. And she's like, oh, okay, well, if you get your bachelor's, you can, become an officer in the military. And then I changed it again. I changed it to PR, journalism with an emphasis in PR.
You're like, no.
And then she finally said, you know what, do what makes you happy. But either way, she always like had to make it a point to mention that, the government, like a government job is the most stable job. I mean, to her credit, she's been working for the government for 30 years now, working in San Diego at the Balboa Hospital. So, kudos to her. Obviously, she wasn't wrong. It's just that for me, I couldn't even fathom, serving. I was like, well, Mom, don't you remember what happened? Like, do you remember what happened with us being in the service? And also because at the time, at least amongst my friends, the military seemed like a profession to fall back on. It was kind of like, oh, if you don't do well in college, you join the military. So the perception of it, I mean, my personal perception plus the social perception,
of course,
was kind of like, And however, though, here I am at 34 looking back and, kind of having met my husband and getting to know the military community today. Honestly, if I had to do it again, I would have joined. I would have done at least 4 years, to be honest. But it's neither here or there anymore.
Right. I mean, you're still involved. You know what I mean? You're
Yeah.
still involved with the military community. So I know that you were awarded the Media Professional of the Year at the Rosie Network Entrepreneur Awards. So as a successful entrepreneur, what's your secret? Come on, give us that special sauce.
You know what my So no, actually I can give you an answer, and it's commitment. It's like, it's just having this, absolute, kind of determined, like this absolute, what's the word I'm looking for? I just like absolutely decided. I was like, for whatever, like, as long as this supports the lifestyle I want, I'm staying in it, And so I think you just have to have that fortitude, that conviction of what you want. Because here's the thing. A couple of weeks ago, I met someone here in the office. I'm working out of a co-working space, and she was just visiting for a couple of weeks, so she didn't have a membership here. However, she ran into me and she's like, "Oh, you have an office here?" She's like, "So what's it like to be an entrepreneur? It must be amazing, huh?" And honestly, I was like, I had to pause because I was like, how do I say this without like
scaring the crap out of her?
Also like encouraging her to do it anyway. And she's like, "How's it like?" And I said, "Well, it's a lifestyle. It's a lifestyle choice because, there's going to be some times where you don't know where your next paycheck is going to come from. There's going to be some times where, you thought that you could be in business with your friends and you realize you were absolutely wrong. You're going to realize that, again, what I was saying earlier, you got to kill your baby, figuratively speaking. Don't like literally do that, And I feel like I need to explain that so people don't think I'm interpreting it wrong. But killing your baby basically means, I'm just going to say it now just to get out of the way. It means that like you were so in love with your idea, so in love with your concept, so in love with your business, and yet you're not seeing any traction for it. And you have to kind of like make that choice of like, am I going to continue to hold on to this idea of this perfect product idea business, or am I going to make money? And basically move on from this idea. So that's what I mean when I say kill your babies.
Yes.
It sounds really bad to say. I feel like I need to rephrase
You're like, wait.
So I hope that footnote helps explain what I mean by that. And another phrase I want to mention is, since we're talking about death here, is you got to eat what you kill in the entrepreneur space. Like you really got to, like, the only way you get paid is if you actually sell. And, learning how to sell is it requires so much personal transformation. It requires so much of looking inward and acknowledging your flaws and insecurities and, maybe that the skeletons in your closet that you've been, putting off for a while to not, whatever. And it really just requires you to be your most authentic self. And that requires so much humility. That requires like so much like putting yourself out there and being vulnerable and publicly making mistakes that, Kat, a lot of people can't do that. A lot of people can't. It's really difficult, especially if you are coming from a comfy job. Luckily for me, luckily and unluckily, I lost my dad at 10. So I didn't have that protector growing up. Secondly, being a military kid and then like getting fired from 4 jobs, I had every motivation, every motivation. And like you said earlier, I like how you said, like, it's not really failure, it's failing forward. I like to call it as redirection. It's not rejection, it's redirection. I'm constantly being redirected to be the best version of myself for that season of time. And so, yeah, I would say commitment is the key word. It's like you have to absolutely be like, this is my life, period. And I'm going to make sure that everything I do is in support of this lifestyle that I want. Because again, it hasn't been easy. I've definitely had friends who were making more money than me when they just started their job. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I haven't even made that in 3 years combined, like it's a lifestyle choice. And however, I have to say it's a good one because I don't have a boss and I love what I do. And everything I put out there is really coming from my heart. And, if people like what I've done, then it tells me that I'm doing something right. And there's nothing more fulfilling than, like helping people with something that you created. So yeah, that's my answer for you. Commitment.
Absolutely. It's almost like you're married to it. Sometimes you're always, your marriage shifts with each few years or whatever, and you have to both be willing to shift at the same time. And, even, for me, when I started my podcast, I did it totally wrong, y'all. I started off with one episode, one. And someone said, "Oh, wow, you're not going to make it." And I was like, really? Watch me.
Yes.
So, it's that commitment to it. And it's always learning. Never think that you know everything you need to know. Because when you stop learning, you stop growing. So I'm always like, "Oh, what's that? That's kind of cool." And maybe it's not for me right now, but I always have a book with me and I'm writing stuff down and I'll go back to it and go, "Oh yeah, I remember that," making notes about it. But just, being married to it and not being afraid to say, "You know what? I need help." Sometimes you have to ask for that help. Because if someone had told me when I started podcasts that I would have to put myself out there on social media, I might not have done it. Because I thought, "Oh, there's my podcast. I'm ready to go." And they said, "Well, how are you going to market it?" And I was like, "What? Huh? Wait, what?" So I had to learn.
It gets me to think about like how most people, I think the average person is always trying to find their status quo. They're always just trying to get to that place of comfort. And even if they're upset with their job and they try to get a new job, they get to this level of frustration again because maybe they're not happy, but they're happy enough to not leave. And the thing is with entrepreneurship, you can't do that. You can't settle. There's no status quo because, the truth is you're an ever evolving human being.
Yes.
And I think that entrepreneurship really honors that. And a lot of people, and just to everyone's credit, there could be reasons why you don't pursue this life. You could have a family, you could have someone you're taking care of. There are a million reasons. I just believe that if you choose this lifestyle, it means you're choosing it every day. Just like how you mentioned, I mean, there's no better way to describe it than a marriage, because it's like, there's going to be some days where you absolutely do not love, the person you're with or with the business. There's going to be some days where you're just kind of going through the motions and you feel like you took 10 steps forward and 20 steps back. It doesn't matter, because as long as you have that fortitude and that conviction that this is your life, this is your lifestyle, then I think nothing can get in the way of that, but you have to have that commitment, that dedication, that fortitude, that conviction that this is my life. I've committed to this. Therefore, I'm going to put up with everything that comes with it.
Absolutely. I mean, there are times when I love podcasting, but sometimes I don't like it. Things that I have to do, like I love my husband. There are some times where I'm like, "Ooh, I don't know. I'm not sure I like him today."
I'm with you.
But also being an entrepreneur means you have to connect with people. People buy from people that they like. So if you're always on social media and you're always giving and and people might say, "Hey, what's she doing over here? Let me take a look." So it's being authentic. And I people, ever since this whole pandemic, you're like, "Oh, you got to be authentic." I'm like, now it's starting to be that word that you don't like to say. Yeah. Just be you. If you want to do a podcast, but be you. I call it a secret sauce, your special sauce. Bring it to the mic. Whether it's, a goofy laugh like mine or certain sayings that I have. It's you. It's part of you. So do you and keep it moving and make sure that that you like it most of the time. I will say that sometimes you won't like it, but you love it enough that you're willing to do the work every day. Yeah. So with that said, what keeps you motivated in doing your podcast?
Wow. The one word that comes to mind for me is community. I'm very fortunate that both of the podcast shows that still exist today is because I have co-hosts for them. And in addition to that, I have an active community of listeners reaching out. And, I feel like this year it's interesting because at least with Holding Down the Fort, we're currently off season. There's a part of me that kept wanting to like push it back. It's like, oh, I don't know when I'm ready to start yet. But it's because of the community, like my co-host and, people interested in it and continuing to bring it up where I'm like, okay, well, this show is beyond me now. I just get to kind of ride the wave of its existence and making sure that it continues to exist. And so I think the reason, why a lot of people pod fade, if anything, is because maybe they haven't gotten the traction they were looking for. Maybe they weren't, getting the community they were hoping for. And I feel very fortunate to say that I did. I feel obligated. And more importantly, I feel needed. And I think during the pandemic, in a time where it felt so isolating, like it was really podcasting that made me feel needed. Like I had to be somewhere. I had to interview someone. And it's like every time I interviewed someone, even if I was, let's say dreading it minutes before we get on the Zoom call, because it's like, oh, I got to turn my face on. I got to get my, I got to get my energy levels in, I got to,
right.
Yes,
of course.
It's like, but usually at the end, I'm like, wow, I needed that today. Like I needed their story today. And I would say it's because of the community. So, shout out to community. If it wasn't for them, if it wasn't for people waiting and asking when the show is coming back, for people who want to see the show grow, like, I don't think I would. I keep telling my co-hosts for the Holding Down the Fort, for example, I'm like, it's because of you that the show keeps going. Cause I really wanted to go on a long break, but you really love the conversations and I want to honor that. And I say that in the best way possible, because it's like, it does help hold me accountable. So community.
And I think it's meeting people. Like I told someone the other day, they're like, oh, I'm so sick of Zoom. I've got, Zoom fatigue. And I was like, what?
Yeah.
I never get tired of talking with people and meeting new people and just chatting. What are you up to? What are you doing? Because it just, sounds so cool. And what you're doing and how you're doing it. And when something's, bigger than you can sit back and go, wow, look at that wave.
Yeah.
It was just a little ripple right before. And now it's this 10, 20 foot wave. And you're just like, that's really cool. So, I want to be like you when I grow up. I'm just saying, but
oh no.
So Jen, where can people find you?
Yeah. I mean, right now I'm most active on LinkedIn. So you can find me on there, Jen Amos. I think I'm the only person with that name as far as I know, but if not, like look for the Asian one. And if you want to subscribe to my podcast show, Holding Down the Fort podcast.com, it'll be able to provide all the links for you to, find us on social, but also, learn more about me and my co-host. And yeah, I would say those are the two places, LinkedIn or Holding Down the Fort podcast.com.
Well, Jen, thank you so much for being a guest today. I've had a good time, but I always have a good time, so I'm not sure what that means. I think
you're very present. Like I think you're very present with your guest, and I think in response to when people say like, oh, I have Zoom fatigue. I think like part of that fatigue is, it could be coming from like losing the reason why you're going on Zoom to begin with. It's like, as long as I think as long as you kind of like know why you're doing what you're doing and how it adds to your life, then you don't get fatigued, Anyway, that's my thoughts on that. But I am so glad that you enjoyed our conversation today, and thank you for having me.
Yeah, you're so welcome. I just want to, piggyback on that is no matter what it is you're trying to do, whether it's start a business, start a podcast, when it gets to a point where you just think, oh, this is just getting hard, remember your why. Remember why you started. What was that why? And I don't want to make it seem small, but your why is going to carry you through the hard times. So if you're starting a podcast because you want to make lots of money and everyone's doing it, don't. Yeah. Okay, I'm just going to put it out there.
Don't romanticize.
Don't romanticize it, right?
We will be the first to like demystify, de-romanticize. Like this is like a marriage that's about to like end in divorce.
Yeah.
Like it's not, but it's like, you have to constantly renew your mind. And like you said, remind yourself, like, why are you doing this? I ask myself, why do I keep podcasting? I actually thought about it as I was driving to the office. I was like, why do I do this? Well, it does fill up my cup. It gives me the opportunity to exercise my voice and connect with good people who value active listening and
Yes.
storytelling. And you know what? Like it's so difficult to find that in the physical world nowadays in local community that like, yeah, I'm gonna stick to podcasting, unless you can show me a better place for me to find this kind of connection. Like, I'm staying here. I'm staying
Yeah. And you find that sometimes people, even person to person, don't connect that way. Because I've been to a lot of networking events in person prior to COVID where, they don't listen. They just hear you and you're like, oh, okay, bye. And you're like, wow,
here's
that was a waste of time.
Take my business card. Okay. Just kill the tree for this. It's fine. No big deal.
But thank you so much for taking the time to be here today. It's been such a pleasure chatting with you and having the audience hear about you and what you do. And for my sisters in service, please take care of yourself. Stay safe until next time. But I'm going to add one more thing. It's never too late to start your impossible.